You're listening to the Wayward Atheist podcast. Hello, everyone. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining us. This is a podcast where borders collide, where the gloves are off, where filters are removed, where we tell you exactly what we think about the news, politics, and religion. The Wayward Atheist podcast is dedicated to free thought, reason, and the pursuit of truth. You can follow us on Twitter at Wayward Atheist, on Spreaker, Stitcher, and iTunes. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a comment on our Facebook page. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
This week's episode of The Wayward Atheist has been brought to you by the Crafty Freethinker, atheist, humanist, and secular jewelry for those who don't like the idea of wearing a torture device around their neck. Find the Crafty Freethinker on Etsy and Amazon. Links are in the show notes, or simply Google the Crafty Freethinker as one word. Hello and welcome to the Wayward Atheist podcast. I'm Dave, aka the Great White North.
I'm Corinne, aka the Yank.
I'm Big Black Gay Dave.
And I'm Ed, the Everyday Atheist.
And tonight we are joined by Dr. Darrel Ray. He's going to teach us about jerking off.
And Dr. Darrel Ray is the man. If you don't know who he is, you're living under a fucking rock. He wrote the God Virus, Sex and God, and has the Recovering from Religion Foundation.
Right.
Why did I stumble over that?
I gave you a plug on the show last week, Darrel, your foundation.
Oh yeah, you should receive it in the mail in a couple days. Careful, It's one of the ones with the tails.
Okay.
So, Corinne, tell us about doing your segment live and who the special lady is that you're doing it live for.
Well, Ravenous Baboon on Twitter, who I absolutely adore. She campaigned for this sex segment subject of masturbation. So as a present to you, we're doing this segment live, and I've gotten Dr. Darrel Ray to join me on the segment so we can go a little more in depth into the awesomeness that is masturbation.
Good.
I like to call it jerking off.
We'll get into that. Trust me. How are you, Dr. Ray?
I'm doing super. Always glad to talk about jacking off. That's always a topic of pleasure for me.
Hey, as it should be.
I'd rather be doing it than talking about it, though.
Yeah, I know. It's like, man, once I'm done with you fuckers, I'm going to go masturbate and go to bed. But I want to thank all our listeners for their input and participating. So maybe we'll do another poll for next month if we can come up with some topics.
She just said poll on a masturbation show.
All right, on to the topic. Masturbation. What's masturbation? It's just touching yourself and your sex organs for sex pleasure. And some common terms are, jacking off, jerking off, spanking it, rubbing one out. For Ed's sake, what are you guys' favorite name for masturbation?
Called embarrassment. No.
That's not healthy.
Choking the chicken is in there.
Choking the chicken. There you go. The bishop and four sisters.
Double clicking the mouse.
It's called smash cock time.
Stemming the rose. That's for Brokeback Mountain.
What do you call it?
Isn't that like stemming the rose?
I never heard
I didn't watch that movie.
God, you're the worst gay person in the world.
Come on, David. You got a better one than that. Flogging the bishop? No?
Okay. So I want to throw out something here to Darrel. When I was researching this topic, I was on the Planned Parenthood website, and it had said that 7 out of 10 men and 5 out of 10 women masturbate. Now, how accurate are the statistics, Dr. Ray?
I'd say probably, if you got to think of masturbation in two ways. Have you ever masturbated in your whole life?
Okay.
That would be a different statistic than are you currently, do you actively masturbate now in your life? And that would be a different, and the statistic you just cited is probably correct for people now. Because you got to remember, age can get in the way, illness can get in the way. There's other reasons why somebody wouldn't masturbate or couldn't masturbate. So they would drop the statistics down some. But my old mentor, Albert Ellis, used to say 97% of men will admit to masturbating and the other 3% are lying. And that's probably somewhat true over a lifetime.
Oh,
over
yeah.
a life.
Yes. Yeah, I think everybody at some point is
somewhat
going to.
We do know that women masturbate somewhat lower than men, but still probably 70% over a lifetime and 50% at any given time.
Interesting.
Why do you
I
think that
started
is?
masturbating so young, so.
Why do you think that is?
I have literally had women tell me and in therapy that they didn't start masturbating until they had sex, until after they'd had sex, because they had never touched themselves. And more often than not, this isn't true across the board, but I've had more Catholic women tell me that than almost anybody else, that they just were afraid to touch themselves. So I don't know. I think our culture shames women so much about their bodies and about their sexuality that some women do grow up terrorized of touching themselves. And I've had enough cases to say that I see a pattern in that, at least within a therapeutic setting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in my experience, being a Mormon, or lack thereof, no, it was seen as something so deplorable that you wouldn't want to. I mean, and say you did, and the next day you failed your test or whatever, you would attribute it because you did that. Then you're basically convicting yourself, saying that this was the reason why I failed my test.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And so you just learn to switch turn that switch off.
Yeah. And people can. I mean, you can turn that switch off. Unfortunately, it means something's going to come out somewhere else. Self-hate, shame, and, negative emotions, depression. There could be a lot of other things that happen.
So that song in the Book of Mormon musical about turning it off like a light switch, that's based in
That's
something.
valid.
Wow.
But
Wow.
as a teen male, even like into my 20s, if I went through a period where I wasn't jerking off and I wasn't having sex, it would just come out in my sleep anyways.
Right.
So, like I would imagine that like you guys must have a lot of wet dreams in Mormonism.
No, I've never had one, actually, ever.
Wow. You're a fucking strange dude.
Well, I mean,
All right, Ed. All right, Ed. Do you masturbate?
currently, yeah, but I didn't up until like one of the first questions I was ever asked when I was on the show was like, during your mission, did you jerk off?
I asked you that question.
Yeah, and honestly, never. It never came across my mind. I was at that stage so programmed not to even consider that as an option that that light bulb was gone for I'd say 20 years maybe.
Wow.
Wow, that's something else.
I can clearly remember the first time I came from masturbating. I was 12 or 13. I was in the bathtub and I never looked back. Fuck.
I was in the pool in front of the jet.
Oh, cool.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never moving from this spot again, ever. So my parents figured it out, and every time I was there, they're like, out of the pool, dear. I'm like, oh, man.
I have a question for Dr. Or Dr. Darrel Ray, I should say. Is there other reasons other than religion why people would avoid masturbating? Like maybe shame from their parents or...
Yeah. Well, there's an entire group of so-called atheists that are joining this no-fap movement, which is beyond me.
What? Why?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Well, when you look underneath it, they're not necessarily atheists. There seems to be, of course, their roots and their people are kind of secretive, but it seems to be being led by Mormons. But I'm not all positive about that. But yeah, there's really no reason. As a human being, you're programmed, male and female, to keep your genitalia active.
Mm-hmm.
And there's reasons on both sides for men and for women. For men, the sperm is only good for about 5 days. So if the sperm is collecting inside of you, it's dying. The minute those sperms get produced, they're good for about 5 days. So if you leave them in there, they're going to die, and they actually can cause trouble. They actually can cause physical problems. So by moving them out, you keep fresh inventory in there,
Mm-hmm.
and you also reduce the likelihood they can cause trouble. You also want your genitalia to be ready to have sex because evolutionarily, a man never knows when he's going to get the opportunity or when he's going to get, quote, lucky. And he wants to have fresh sperm ready, not old sperm.
He also doesn't want it to be over too quick.
Right, exactly. So that's on the male side. There's actually a biological imperative men should be masturbating. And here's, for all the listeners, this is my prescription. Jack off at least once every 5 days or every 5 hours, whichever you need to do. For women, it's just as important, because the research shows that women who have frequent orgasms, whether through intercourse or through masturbation, have healthier immune responses within the reproductive tract. And they respond better when they are having sex, and they lubricate better, and they stay lubricating longer in their life, later in their life. There's so many reasons for women to masturbate. And
I didn't need any more reasons, but thank you.
Is your immune system, Corinne.
Is it true that it can help prevent colon cancer in men?
Oh, yeah. The research seems to indicate it's a correlation. We're not sure about the causation, but it's strong enough. They're making pretty strong claims about that now.
Well, there's a lot of mentally, sexually, physically things that are good about it, right? Obviously decreases anxiety. That's why I have to do it before bed every night.
Right.
I just don't have a choice.
And it really helps you sleep. I mean, it releases the kinds of chemicals that relax you and make you want to go to sleep.
And it relieves menstrual cramps, from what I've heard, and that's just another excuse for me to masturbate, I'm sure.
From what you've heard, you mean you haven't experienced it?
No, I do it all the time, but my menstrual cramps are so bad. Like, I have endometriosis and fibroids, so it's not a noticeable difference.
Okay. Some women, it just is like miraculous. An orgasm or two will just almost take away the cramps. So yeah, it's really a good thing for some. And for masturbation, but some women report it works better if it's vaginal intercourse, which kind of leads us to one piece. Pleasing yourself can change your body. It can really make your body more responsive and healthier and stronger. There's so many positives that come from it. So you really, really need to take that in consideration when you're pleasing yourself. Take care of yourself.
True. I check my Fitbit and I go into that fat burning mode.
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
Is it like a quarter mile running equals one masturbatory session?
It depends on how I masturbate, and I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
You're welcome, Ed.
I would say women are lucky with all the toys that they have. We have Fleshlight.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't have one, but how are they? What do you like them?
I don't have one either. My hand is good.
What
you don't know what a Fleshlight is, Edward? It's a pussy or a mouse that's put into a canister that looks like a flashlight, so people don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And on the inside, apparently it's ribbed and whatever. But I don't know. My hand works pretty well. Plus, I'm not cut, so I don't need lube or anything like that.
Yeah,
so just my
and
hand
also it's just hard to even find. I mean, like, what's the point?
Yeah, yeah. I need like tweezers and pepper and all kinds. That's my setup. Fleshlight, I would just drown in it.
Okay, Doctor, I have a question.
Yep.
I can bring myself to orgasm without touching myself. It's not usually quite as intense, but I can do it. Uh-huh. Is there a reason why I can and so many women can't, or is it just that they haven't tried?
Well, the answer is kind of twofold. I think some women have never tried, but it's not that common either. I don't know what the statistics are, but I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 15% of women can orgasm without touching themselves. Now, they all do it somewhat differently. I don't know how you do it, but they might wiggle. They might jerk their butts up and down. They might just sit there and think. I've had 2 lovers in my experience that come just by sucking cock. And they can have hard orgasms just by sucking their lover's cock. And I've always been amazed at that. One of them said those are some of her best orgasms. She's not touching herself. She's touching me, which I'm happy about, but she's not touching herself.
Nice. Well, when I was recently traveling and I had an orgasm on the plane, and the person in the seat next to me had no idea. And I just usually think about being tied up and beaten, and that's pretty much all I need. Right,
yeah. Well, it's fantasy.
That and being waterboarded.
Yeah, mental activity can really be quite stimulating. And guys, I know guys that can come without touching themselves too, on planes and things like that.
Can you, Ed?
No. No, not at all. Oh, Jesus.
Sorry. I meant, can you, David?
I don't think so, but I'd like to. I think that's pretty hot.
So you're going to try that tonight now, aren't you?
I don't think it'll work. It's just not.
You don't know until you try.
Maybe. Who knows?
I can do it in my sleep. I can do it in my sleep.
Okay.
In my sleep. And even when I was jerking off and having sex, I still had wet dreams. I get there's a few different type of wet dreams that I used to get. This is gonna sound fucking ridiculous, but I would have a dream about either or a demon or a vampire biting me, and when it bit me, a female, when it bit me, I would come.
Oh.
In my dream, but if I was having sex with a girl, I would just get in, and in my dream, it would just get in, and then bam, it would shoot. It would be like the worst two-stroke joke ever.
That sounds like
some
some
times at on high with Damone.
Like worse than that. It would be like just getting it towards the pussy.
Oh, that's a damn shame.
That actually sounds like some good erotica storytelling.
Yeah, like humorous erotica.
Well, the vampire thing, the whole intersection with vampire and sex and all that. Can be
they weren't attractive though. That's apparently it's common to have crazy fuckheads call it succubus, and the female succubus and the male and incubus because the male penetrates or whatever. It's total woo-woo shit, but apparently the dream itself is common.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Like to have a female entity or demon or whatever you want to fucking call it, the bullshit. But the dream itself is common.
Yeah.
All the woo that they put around it is bullshit though.
An interesting thing to pay attention to is the dreams or the fantasies that get you off. Because that, I've talked in, I don't know if I've talked with you guys about it, but the notion of your primary sexuality and your secondary sexuality. Did we talk about that before?
No, we didn't talk about that.
Okay. Well, your primary sexuality is, you're straight, heterosexual, bisexual, whatever. That's the primary sexuality. That does not drive your behavior. Secondary sexuality is what drives your behavior. And that's things like you like being tied up, or you fantasize about a vampire biting you. Those are the keys to what your secondary sexual preferences are. And it's really, if you think about it, what gets you off? What gets you off? Oh,
crap does not get me off. Dr.
No, that's like one of the three things that are on the absolute no list.
Well, we're in some kind of tornado warning right now, and my phone just went off, so I don't have to worry. Or at least
you're good, hopefully.
Yeah. So if we get lights out or something, it's probably because of electricity. Right. Yeah. So anyway, I think this secondary sexual preference is really fascinating because you learn it and you find out about what it is through your dreams, through your fantasies, what kind of porn you like, and all those things happen while you're masturbating, oftentimes, or when you're having a wet dream. I find people are afraid. They don't want to admit, I dream about being tied up, or I'm afraid I don't like to admit I orgasm when I get bit in my dream by a vampire. But that's the secret to your secondary sexual preferences.
What if it's really, really, really dark and twisted?
It's your brain. I've had a few dark and twisted fantasies in my life. I've had a few bosses I wanted to kill. I didn't kill them, though. What you do in your head is totally different than what you do in real life. And there's absolutely zero evidence that what people think about and dream about, fantasize about, actually transforms into behavior. It just doesn't. There's no evidence for it.
Because the thought of getting waterboarded turns me on.
There you go.
The thought of getting actually tortured to see how far I could go.
Yeah.
Gets me off. And some of my thoughts just scare me. I'm like, oh gosh, what's going on in here?
Well, they're scary, but isn't that part of what turns you on? See, the brain, when you're fantasizing, the brain doesn't really know the difference between reality and fantasy in a dream, or even in a fantasy that you're having while you're awake. The body is still going to respond. Like the adrenaline is going to kick in, and the adrenaline may help you, or whatever other hormones kick in, may help you come to orgasm. And it's that fear. A lot of people, especially submissives in the BDSM world, really get off on that edge of being afraid, and just a little fear, and just a little something that puts the edge on it. And some submissive women have told me that's when they get their best orgasms, when they're tied up.
Yeah, I'm a complete
A bit of
submissive.
rage.
I'm a submissive. And
Well,
so it's that humiliation, like, but I also like the pain too. I like being completely just controlled, consensual, non-consent, anything that's,
right.
I don't know, just that giving up of power to somebody, even though you have the power to stop it with a safe word. But I've never used my safe word because I like just giving up that power for that period of time.
Well, and you're probably playing with people who are very competent.
Oh yeah, only people I trust.
Right. So so if you're tied up by somebody and you're getting off, or you're just fantasizing about being tied up, the body's responding the same way. Maybe not quite as strong, but still responding. The same pathways are being used. And that's what the common person doesn't understand, and that's what scares them. They think, well, I dream about being tied up and tortured. That means I want to be. I might one night go out on a dark street and find somebody to tie me up and torture me. No, that's not going to happen.
No, I wouldn't do that.
No.
No, I'd find myself a master to go do that for me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it true that men are more visual and females are more like into reading about it and hearing about it, audio, and it's more mental than it is physical? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I don't know because I'm probably
you've never had sex before.
No, I'm probably
go on.
Eve, right? But I mean, seriously, is that true or is that just bunk?
Yes, there's a good deal of truth to it, but there's you need to think of these things as a continuum with bell curves. If you understand what a bell curve is, you can have a bell curve for males and a bell curve for females, and going from say the auditory to the visual or some other continuum. I don't care, from the tactile to the auditory or whatever. There's an overlap between the two. Some women are more visual than some men are, but on the whole, most men are more visual than most women. But to try and make a blanket statement would be inappropriate and incorrect. There's a hell of a lot of visual women out there that want to see it. I know a lot. I know a lot of women that like the same kind of porn that a lot of men do. They're very visual about it. We did some research back in 2012. It's published online. You can go look at it, called Sex and Secularism, What Happens When You Leave Religion. And we found it was hilarious. We asked them, what kind of porn do you like? And guys liked the quick jerk-off porn. That was their main thing they liked the most of our sample. And there was about 8,000 or 9,000 men and about 5,000 or 6,000 women in our sample. And the women, we asked them what kind of porn they liked, and by far they said erotic novels. In other words, eroticism with a plot. So, and it was really clear between these two groups. Now, we gave them choices, and the women, the second thing women liked was DVDs or movies with erotic movies with a plot. Well,
gosh, they're so boring though. Like, don't you just want to get to the good stuff so you can get off and go to bed?
Well, you just made my point for me. There you go.
Well, that could be the good stuff for those women, obviously.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
So a good number of these women said they did like the kind of quick porn, but it was number 4 on their list, where it was number 1 on the males list. Whereas erotic novels were number 4 on the males list and number 1 on the females list. It was hilarious to see that you could just turn these upside down and they would be true for each sex. But they overlap. There was no doubt they overlap.
There was one novel I read that it wasn't an erotic novel, but it had eroticism in it. And the protagonist, she was touched by the god of punishment, and she felt pleasure as pain. And I was like, holy shit, that's me. So those books actually do turn me on, but that's like few and far between.
I read the story of O back in, get this, I'll reveal something about, I read the story of O in 1975. And I jerked off to that story, that novel. I don't know how many times. But that's one of the few novels I've ever found erotic, but it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one I have is called Kushal's Dart, and I don't care who the fuck you are. That novel's gonna get you off. It's awesome. Speaking of getting off, I wanted to get into sex toys a little bit, but I guess we already touched on it. But just for Ed, buy your wife a rabbit, and I'm holding one up so he can see it.
Yeah.
This is one of the newer versions. Buy it for her. She will love you.
It's bigger than me. No thanks. I've been trying to tell.
But like, look at this.
Look at
this. This swivels to hit the G spot, and it has 7 different vibrations, including different kind of pulsing and everything. Trust me, you will get laid a lot more often if your wife learns to use this.
I'll be obsolete. What are you doing?
I'm sorry, Ed. I love
you. There is some research that shows that men who are comfortable with sex toys with their partners get laid more than men who don't, and that becomes a pretty important component of the sexual relationship. So,
I have another question because I'm the naive one here. Is it normal to have wet dreams or not? Or like me, is it weird or not normal not to have them?
Almost every boy has wet dreams. Not all of them. Obviously, you're maybe one that doesn't, but by far the majority of boys do. And a significant number of girls do. Probably not. It's self-reported. It's hard sometimes to know. People lie about their sexual.
Is it normal to last into their late 20s like me?
I have wet dreams. Now, I'm significantly older than you. I just had my 66th birthday 2 days ago. I still have wet dreams. It's just.
Did you get your birthday head?
Oh, hell yeah.
That was the real question I wanted to ask.
Several times. Hey, I never stopped with one.
And a corollary to that, do you think it's because of the religious repression that may have prevented? I mean, because for the majority of all my teenage life, up until I was in my early 20s, there was nothing, no discussion about it. No, I mean, fuck, I was 26 before I had sex. So,
right, yeah.
This is is that because of the repression, or is it because
it could be it? I think there's several things that are going on here, and that's one. The first thing I always look at is just biology, because there's people who have a latency period. They simply doesn't kick in. I know guys who didn't express any interest in any kind of sexual activity, masturbation, pornography, anything until they were in their early 20s, and it seemed to be the way their body was programmed. It just seemed to be the way they worked. Now I know other people that didn't engage, and just because they were terrorized, they had been so programmed to fear hell or fear it would kill their marriage if they ever got married, that kind of bullshit. So I don't know which it is, and it could be a combination. And there's another thing is people, not everybody's not programmed the same way. Hormones don't kick in exactly the same way in everybody. And you might be more asexual at different points in your life. Some people, I've known women and men that once they got divorced, they had a bad marriage, they kind of turned sex off and they weren't interested in it for maybe the rest of their life. It just didn't. But were they asexual all along or not? I don't know. Or were they just going through a period? I've known some women go 4 or 5 years without sex, and they said, I didn't miss it. And then it kicked back in. I can tell you one person that a client I had some years ago, she went without sex for 5 or 6 years.
Oh,
and she said, I absolutely didn't miss it. It wasn't a problem. Men were hitting on me. I wasn't interested. And then said, one day I woke up horny as hell started masturbating. I hadn't masturbated in 5 years. Started masturbating, and I couldn't get enough. I had to go out and find a guy as quick as possible. Now, why did that happen? I don't know. It came after a divorce, pretty bad. Maybe somehow she turned it off. I don't know.
I know growing up, it was, you were always reinforced that it was wrong. It's something to be ashamed of. In fact, they've given you strict guidelines how not to. But even after I left Mormonism, you still have that. Up until a few years ago, I'd still feel guilty.
Yeah.
And that's a long process. I mean, it took me years to even not to feel that guilt. Now, there's still a twinge every now and then, but not as strong as it used to be.
Right. Well, and you're absolutely not unusual there. I find a lot of people raised in religions have what I call residual guilt on well past the time they leave a religion. But if you think of it this way, when you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, you're learning your native language, and you just learn it. It's just there. It just comes into our brains are programmed to listen and understand it. At the same time, though, you're also learning about important things in your environment, like don't go across the street by yourself because a car might run over you. Or if you're in a hunter-gatherer society 10,000 years ago, your parents would say, don't go into that bush because the lions will eat you or the cheetahs will get you. And you listen to them. But at the same time, your parents say, don't go into that bush because there are demons inside that bush and the demons will infect you. Or don't talk to kids of another religion because they're infected. They've got demons in them. And as a 4, 5, 6-year-old, you have no clue what's true and what's not. Your brain is just programmed to listen to your parents because the kids that listen to their parents are alive today and their progeny are alive today. The kids that didn't listen to their parents at that age are dead. They didn't get to reproduce. So there's some evolutionary reasons why at that age, children pay a lot of attention. That's why kids are so right, wrong, good, bad, black, white so much at that age, because they're trying to learn the rules. And it's a good thing because it keeps them from getting killed, eaten by lions or whatever. But when you're in our current situation with our current culture is saying that demons can get in you and devils and Satan and you'll kill your marriage if you masturbate, and masturbation's a bad thing, and you're getting all these, and these are programmed before your rational brain can discriminate between what is reasonable and what's unreasonable. So when you get to be older, they're still there. And that's why it's so damn hard to get rid of things like the fear of hell and guilt around masturbation or guilt around having sex with somebody you're not married to. Because those were programmed before your rational mind even had the capability of discriminating. And I'm guessing that's why you still get twinges. Hey, I still, every now and then it hits me. I've been out of this stuff for decades. And every now and then I'll get a twinge of something that looks and feels like guilt. I think that's just normal. If we can get rid of this shit in our children, if we can raise our kids sex positive, they won't have to deal with this.
I think that's important to teach kids that it's okay to masturbate. Just go in private somewhere and do it.
Right.
I told my 4-year-old that.
There's even classes for parents about how to talk to your kids because it's such an uncomfortable topic for some parents.
My 4-year-old was pulling his pud in the living room the other day, and I said, Parker, it's okay to do that, but go upstairs or go to the washroom. Nobody wants to watch you doing that.
Yeah.
Little girl I used to babysit for, she used to take this like round block out and roll around on top of it, and I was like, okay, when you do that, you have to go in your room and close the door, okay? Because kids, there's nothing wrong with it. Just,
kids are going to play with themselves. There's evidence that in utero, fetuses touch themselves. So we know that it's very pleasurable even before you're born.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be what the cutoff is for abortion, when they can learn to touch themselves. Well, you can't abort them now. They already know what it's like.
Well, another thing, excuse me, Ed, that just to throw out here is your body goes through 3 phases of sexual development. One is in utero, and then one is later and you can actually see it in the way your body develops, and it has to do with when the hormones are kicking in, and it's around males, it's when testosterone kicks in. So you can see that when the testosterone kicks in early in fetal development, the male genitals start forming. And without the testosterone, there are no male genitals. They're because the default in humans is female genitalia. And then right at the end, just before the baby's born, in the last trimester, even late then, there's another shot of testosterone. And that shot of testosterone programs the brain. Now, if you think about this, it's interesting. What if you get the shot of testosterone first that starts the genitals moving and creating the genitals, but you don't get the second shot and your brain doesn't get reprogrammed? You're going to come out of the womb with male genitals and a female brain because the default is always female. Or what if you get no shot to start the genitals going, but you get that second shot that reprograms the brain? Then you're going to have somebody come out that's brain-wise male and genital-wise female. And then later there's more times when hormones kick in for both boys and girls, and you get the secondary sexual characteristics like breasts starting and pubic hair and stuff like that. And that's another programming. Well, what happens at that, and I don't go into too much detail unless you want me to here. What happens at that time is there's no, we're not ants, and we're not dogs. We don't just kind of automatically know what to do with our sexuality. We have to learn it from our culture. And that's really, at that point in time, our bodies are saying, sex is really important. Sex is really important. And your brain's looking around to see what kind of sex is really important in this culture. And every culture has a different attitude and different focus. So that's why as humans, we don't have a pre-programmed sexuality because our sexuality is so programmed by culture. For example, why do some cultures, a lot of the women have very small breasts, whereas in other cultures, a lot of the women have large breasts? You go to Wales, I'm a breast man. I can't believe all the breasts in Wales. It just turns me on to go to Wales. Go to Japan, and women hardly have any breasts. Those are cultural things. And so when you're raised in those cultures, your brain is looking around, what are the cultural signals for sexuality? And that's what you're responding to. And you can have, so you're programming, your brain's programming, you're 10, 11, 12 years old about what's going to be your secondary sexual preferences. That's where the secondary sexual preferences come in. And that's
Would
where
that
you learn.
explain preferences? Like I grew up in a multicultural family with many different traits and all of that. And I have a very vast array of preferences. Like I don't prefer one race or another, one size over another, one nothing over another. Except for Asian guys. I don't really like them. Unless for the most part. What we realize from evolutionary biology now is that culture, we are shaping ourselves. We are creating our own sexuality. Like I said, breast size there's a lot of cultural influence there. If you go to Africa, there's some tribes there that have something called steelpigia, and you've seen it. You probably don't know what this is. Have you heard of steelpigia, Ed? Haven't? Okay. Well, that's all right. Sorry. So steelpigia is large butts. So some tribes, large butts are extremely attractive. And a woman with a large butt is much more likely to get married, to have children. Small butt women, they'll ignore them. They won't get a husband. And that's what it is in that culture. So if you think about it, probably for thousands of years, they've literally been breeding women through that sexual preference, kind of like the peacock, the male peacock with all its colorful feathers. Well, we've done the same thing. And probably it may be why I'm not saying it is. It's one of the theories why humans have such big penises relative to other primates. When our penises are very large compared to bonobos and chimps, and especially gorillas. Gorillas' penises are like 1.5 inches long. So there's a reason why things are different by culture and by around the world, because cultures have literally been breeding those things. And that's the reason I talk about that, is because that seems to be where our secondary sexual preferences come from. At 11, 10 years old, you look around and you think your brain gets impressed with something, and then the rest of your life you're interested in that.
Can you change your preferences with age?
Actually, I see preferences changing with age. I don't know that you can change them. Maybe you can, but I know change with age. Yeah.
I know, when I watch crime shows, basically they say if a older lady is raped, it's usually by a younger male, and I'm just wondering, why is that? Is that because, I don't know, is that because he's young and inexperienced, or is it because of something else?
Well, I wouldn't have a clue. I couldn't diagnose from long distance. I know that I see people's preferences changing with age. And I think there probably is something like that going on because where our capacities and our interests change as we grow older. I mean, there's a reason why Donald Trump seems to only go after younger women that are at least 20 or 30 years younger than him. The guy got stuck at 11 years old. He hasn't gone past that yet. His sexual preferences have not changed, by the way.
It's his daughter.
Yeah.
He talked about he would have sex with his daughter if she wasn't.
Yeah, that was.
Have you not seen the creepy online photo? Or the
him?
photo that's online? Him with his daughter on his lap? That is fucking creepy. I don't care
I don't
what.
want to see it. I don't want to.
Listen,
All right, so a serious question for you, Dr. Ray. Does masturbation lead to blindness?
Well, I have to confess, I wear glasses. So what can I say?
Must be a sign. Must be.
And I noticed you're not wearing glasses. So you know where that comes from.
I wear contacts.
Back in the late 1700s and early 1800s, this whole anti-masturbation thing started, and it just grew throughout the 1800s. And this notion of going blind comes really from religious indoctrination that was going on about that time. And then Dr. Kellogg of Kellogg's Cereal came along and really implemented the anti-masturbation regimen that we live with now.
Yeah.
I know biblically it says it's better to cast your seed into a whore than to cast it on the ground. And that was what we were always taught, that it was basically for reproductive purposes. It's not a pleasure thing. It's for reproduction only.
Right.
And but that was one of the scriptures they used, and I thought that was kind of odd because it talks about prostitutes, rather that you do that than tend to basically jerk off, right?
Well, but what you're quoting is from the Book of Mormon, not from the Bible.
No, it's in the Old Testament. I think it's talking to Saul. Not Saul. Is it Samson? It's in the Old Testament. I'll find it for you. And
is it Onan? Is it Onan? Onanism? And Onan failing to spilling his seed on the ground.
It could be because the story is about, and it eludes me right now, but I think the story was about the fact that he was cheating on with his brother's wife.
Yeah. Okay. I can tell you the story. Onan, in that culture, the tradition was that if a man died, then his brother was supposed to impregnate his widow and then raise the child himself. Well, Onan didn't really want to fuck his dead brother's wife. So when it came time to ejaculate, he came out on the ground. And that's where we get the notion of spilling seed on the ground. And the old term was called onanism. Now, the fact is, it had nothing to do with masturbation. Absolutely nothing. It had to do with not wanting to fuck your dead brother's wife. As a result, Onan got killed by God because he refused to follow God's law. Now, you may not know that God's law says you have to fuck your dead brother's wife, period. Or you'll get killed by God. That's the moral of the lesson.
That's crazy.
It is pretty crazy. You're right.
We are getting ready to end this particular segment. Since this topic was lobbied for by Baboon, I made a promise to her. And I hope I haven't told this one yet. And Baboon, she goes by Ravenous Baboon on Twitter. I promised her I would say, she's from Poland. I promised her I'd say a Polish joke. And I've been saying this for a month, so I finally am making good. So, all right. A guy in a bar leans over to the guy next to him and says, "Want to hear a Polak joke?" The guy next to him replies, "Well, before you tell that joke, you should know something. I'm 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, and I'm Polish. The guy sitting next to me is 6'2", weighs 225, and he's Polish. The fella next to him, 6'5", weighs 250, and he's Polish. Now, you still want to tell that joke?" The first guy says, "Nah, I don't want to have to explain it 3 times. With that, I love you, Baboon, and this special live segment was for you. And I want to thank you, Dr. Ray, for helping me with that segment.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. Well, would you love to plug your stuff? I mean, I'm not talking about sex.
His hand.
Okay. Yeah. Have your listeners go get my book, Sex and God: How Religion Distorts Sexuality. or my other book, The God Virus, a bestseller, and listen to my podcast, Secular Sexuality Podcast. I just 2 weeks ago talked to identical twins that are both kinky and both poly, and they're in their early 40s. It is a really cool interview. I've rarely had the opportunity to. Well, how often do you get to talk to identical twins that are both kinky? That was pretty cool. And poly. And so with that, yeah. And, my big party's happening. That's part of the reason I really need to get going is my big party happens next weekend, the Labor Day party. And Seth Andrews is coming to my house along with 200 of my closest friends. And we're going to party for 21 hours.
Don't you tell me Seth Andrews is there and then just leave it like that because you know I'll show up.
Well,
Between you and Seth Andrews, I'm surprised you two haven't written a creeper board about me yet.
Seth is coming to do a live podcast from my house. And I live on 7 acres. I really love where I live. I got a big pond out front with a paddle boat and fish and a big forest all around my house. And people come and camp all weekend. I have people coming in tents and campers and getting hotel rooms. And so that's happening this next weekend, Labor Day. And if your listeners want to listen in, it'll be a live podcast. And we're trying to do a fundraiser, trying to get money for Camp Quest National because Camp Quest is doing such cool things for kids. So anyway, that's everything. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for coming on.
This is your Big Gay World for the week ending August 26th. This week, Egyptian police use Grindr to catch gay men. Trans activists stage sit-ins at Manchester Pride. And recent Wikileaks dump outs gay men and victims of sexual assault. Our first story is from gaystarnews.com. Law enforcement in Egypt have been accused of using the gay hookup app Grindr to lure gay men in order to arrest them, even though it's technically legal to be gay. Reports from local media suggest the police are using features of the app, namely location and profile pictures, to identify them. The men are then charged with quote-unquote inciting debauchery. According to the Jerusalem Post, 11 men were sentenced to up to 12 years in prison in April. Egypt is one of the few countries where homosexuality is de facto illegal. This means it's technically not banned, but police and the justice system use loopholes like inciting debauchery to penalize men who sleep with men. Gaystar News also mentions an article from the lifestyle magazine Cairo Scene, urging gay men to be extremely careful when sharing vital information with users on Grindr, especially in a country like Egypt. Manchester, UK held its Gay Pride Parade on the 27th of August, during which a sit-in was held by trans activists to protest the relatively high incarceration rate and poor treatment of LGBTI people in the criminal justice system. Activists outlined the need for trans prisoners to be sent to prisons that match their gender identity, citing the story of Vicky Thompson, a trans woman who was found unresponsive in her cell last year and later died. According to Gaystar News, before being incarcerated, Thompson told friends she would end her life if sent to a male prison. The day before her death, she complained to her boyfriend she had been bullied for wearing women's clothes. A few protesters expressed discontent at police marching in the parade, and are also protesting the plans for a new prison in Manchester. Jesse Bradley, one of the protesters, called for, quote, a nationwide ban on prison expansion and an urgent review into the conditions within prisons for LGBTQ prisoners, end quote. In our final story from the new civil rights movement, gay men and sexual assault victims have suffered during the fallout of recent WikiLeaks data dumps. According to the Associated Press, the Radical Transparency Group has published medical files belonging to scores of ordinary citizens, while many hundreds more have had sensitive family, financial, or identity records posted to the web. 3 Saudi cables published by WikiLeaks identified domestic workers who had been tortured or sexually abused by their employers, giving the women's full names and passport numbers. One cable named a male teenager who was raped by a man while abroad. A second identified another male teenager who was so violently raped his legs were broken. And a third outlined the details of a Saudi man detained for, quote, sexual deviation, end quote, a derogatory term for homosexuality. The AP also points out the apparent discrepancy between Wikileaks' commitment to protect individual privacy and its mission to reveal the inner workings of states and government agencies. The AP also points out that attempts to reach Wikileaks founder Julian Assange for an interview over the past month have been unsuccessful, and the ex-hacker did not reply to written questions. In a series of tweets following the publication of the Associated Press's story, WikiLeaks dismissed the privacy concerns as, quote, recycled news, end quote, and said they were, quote, not even worth a headline, end quote. And that's been your Big Gay World for this week.
Lawsuit has been leveled against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, alleging sexual abuse of Native American children.
This is the third lawsuit to be filed against the church. Fox 13's Ben Winslow reports.
This lawsuit, filed in Navajo Nation Tribal Court, brings the total number of alleged sex abuse victims to 4. Lawyers for those people say there are more.
Quite frankly, the program, while no doubt well-intentioned, would have to be considered a pedophile's dream.
A man identified as LK is the latest to sue the LDS Church over sexual abuse he claims he experienced while in the church's Lamenite placement program back in the 1970s. The program took children from the Navajo reservation, baptized them into the Mormon faith, and put them with foster homes in Utah, Arizona, and Idaho. LK claims in this lawsuit he was sexually abused by his foster father in the program, and he reported it to a church caseworker,
who tragically told him, well, the school year's almost over. Just tough it out for a while longer.
LK claims the church did not report the abuse to police. LK did not want to be recorded, but told Fox 13 he's bringing the lawsuit now because, quote, this can't be swept under the rug. LK is the 4th person to claim sexual abuse in the church's program. These people, in pictures provided by their lawyers, also claim they were abused in the 1960s and 70s. The church ended the program in 1985.
We've identified more than that, but I don't know if we're going to file lawsuits on behalf of them yet.
The LDS Church says it has toughened its policies on abuse. In a statement to Fox 13, it says it has zero tolerance for abuse of any kind and works actively to prevent abuse. We have not seen the lawsuit and therefore cannot comment on any specifics. The church will examine the allegations and respond appropriately. The church is fighting to keep the lawsuits out of Navajo Tribal Court, arguing Utah is the proper forum where the alleged abuse took place.
Because of the statute of limitations in Utah, we would file it. It would be thrown out of court before the ink even got dry, because we just cannot maintain a case here in Utah under the existing statute of limitations.
Now expect a fight over where this lawsuit will ultimately be heard. A federal judge here in Salt Lake City is expected to schedule a hearing on the LDS Church's request for a restraining order. That'll happen later this year. At Temple Square, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
First thing I'm going to say about it is they've toughened it up so it wasn't zero tolerance before. So before it was cool to fucking molest native children. Like, what the fuck? You had to toughen that up?
Well, I mean, they took natives as slaves for their shipmen, I mean, you can't really expect much better from them now.
There was something they said. It said they ended the Lamenite placement program in 1985, but it was never really ever stopped. I mean, it happened up until 2000, as far as I know of.
Can we not call natives Lamanites?
No, and that was what the program was called. But I mean, Aboriginals of North America,
indigenous folk.
No, I mean, they're taking my ancestors. I mean, I'm part Native American, and yet they're taking people and moving them around as if they were, wards. These are taking wards of the state. They're moving them around as if they own these kids, and that pissed me off more than anything.
There's also a sinister end of this in the last part of this news story. There's also going to be a battleground where they're trying to figure out where to have a jurisdiction, like where to have a court case, right? So if this court case gets battled in Utah, I mean, we all know how the Utah political system is. It's so biased towards
Well, I mean, half the judges are Mormon, right?
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, getting it in a native court might lead to more justice for the victims.
I think the fair thing to do would be to have it out of state and have it in like regular court, but have it out of state. You know what I mean? Like in another jurisdiction.
I think Navajo Tribal Court should be the place to have it.
I think that makes sense, because if it involves the tribe of the people that were affected, and it needs to be sort of influenced by Utah law, I'm not sure. I'm not a legal expert, but it makes sense to me.
I don't know. I don't know how well they follow legal precedent, but there's a show called The Red Road, which has to do with an upstate New York tribe dealing with the regular townsfolk, and from their struggle back and forth between tribal law and state law, because they are reservations. So I think the law is really, really blurry on these topics.
Well, it just shows the lack of foresight. I mean, these people were using this program as a feast for pedophiles. The Mormon Church, who prides itself on being chaste and moral and protecting the kids, is all bullshit, and it covers it up just as much, or probably even more stringently, than the Catholic Church did. And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg in this program.
Our government did it. Our government sent Native kids to schools where they were tortured and raped, and so I mean, like, we're not too much better in Canada when it comes to the Native situation of the past.
No, I've noticed that Canada, like, for as better you are than us, that's one thing you're worse at, is treating your natives at times.
Yeah, it's like we have a weird thing here, and I'm gonna use a word, and everybody's gonna go, "What the fuck are you using that word for?" But we, to this day, have economic and educational apartheid with Native populations up north. They don't get the same education we do, and they don't get the same economic opportunities. And even if we brought them into the cities, they're just not educated the same as we are. Yeah. Their schools are not the same, so they wouldn't. It's not really equal footing. And if you look back to when South Africa actually implemented the pass and apartheid system, the South African government came to Canada to learn from Canada how to fucking, be super racist and keep a certain percentage of your population out of sight and out of mind.
I mean,
I have a friend who lives in Winnipeg, and she's heavily involved in the Native community and helping them. And she said that some of the stuff that goes on, it's just atrocious. And I was like, and Winnipeg's like the shit, like the armpit of Canada, right, or some shit.
Well, it's not really. I just tease her. It's so, like, in Canada, Native populations aren't really in the bigger cities, but Winnipeg, for some reason, and Winnipeg's, I think, somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million people. They have a huge Native population there in the city. It's huge, and there's a lot of gangs and a lot of gang violence. It's running murder capital of Canada consistently, and the Natives get treated like crap there as well. So it's not much different. Our societies in general, like Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand, we all came and took land from people, and I think we could all learn a strong lesson on how to be better to the indigenous people of our countries. So they do have their own problems too that they do need to sort out, but we just need to be better in general. We need to do better than we have been in the past. And
it was back in the past, it was a time of finding and conquering places, and they got conquered. But at the same time, they're still living there, and they need to be treated like human beings that they are.
And compared to other traveling and conquering, it wasn't that fucking long ago. It's like, 3-4 generations ago. So I know people say it was a real long time ago, but if you look it wasn't in the time scale of the planet or the time scale of civilization. It actually really wasn't that long ago. And if you look at, say, Canada, US, how we take in massive amounts of immigrations, An immigrant can land in Canada today and will be treated better than the natives that are in Canada. And that's just a fact.
I've heard that.
That's a straight up fact.
I know that's a fact because I know, and I'd like to kind of do a separate show on natives in both North America.
So I can get a native atheist to do that if you want.
I think my friend might also be able to get a native from Winnipeg. Sure. And I'm pretty sure she's an atheist as well.
Sure.
The saddest part about this whole conversation we're having is, we can say Newfoundland did the worst.
They had it the worst.
No, we actually wiped out an entire.
No, I know, I know, but it wasn't Newfoundlanders. It was British.
No, yeah, but it was not just violence. Smallpox and other diseases helped extirpate them, but. Getting back to the Mormon story, the Mormon clergy, for lack of a better term, on the higher-ups, the current prophet, it was subpoenaed not long ago to respond in this. And I think the buzz is out that he's going senile, so he might not have to testify, which is a tactic they're going to be using. I don't think he is. I think he's perfectly lucid. It's just a tactic to get out of it.
It's a mob boss tactic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're doing.
That is a mob boss tactic. They get old, they pretend they're all fucked up, and they can't. Fuck. Jesus Christ.
And I pity the children because there's only 4 people that have come forward. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think many people are just embarrassed and don't want to come forward. It is a tremendous grievance in the Native community as a whole about what happened in the past, in relatively recent past, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I think this is going to send a big precedent out there.
They should have to pay like we do. What's the name? What's the word for that, David? You know how we had the native school trials not that long ago, and
reparations.
Yeah, reparations. Yeah, so we pay to the survivors of the native schools and their families for the atrocities that took place, and I think that the Mormons
see that over here.
No, Mormons should have to. Like if they go to court, they should have to.
I think the Catholics should have to as well, because the Catholics, what they did to our northern tribes is atrocious.
Well, and it was actually the Catholics that did it in Canada, but our government sent them to the Catholic schools. But our government is the one, or we're the ones that. I don't mind paying that. Like, that's not something I have a problem with. My taxes going to, I don't know, like I know lots of people are like, oh, fuck them. They should have to, like nobody's paying for me, man. But that's just one thing I don't have a problem with my taxes going to.
But let's put this in context because and I'll use Canada as the reference terminology here because it is not just one generation that is affected by this. You get a generation that was ripped from their homes, sent into schools, and they were forced to deny their language, to deny who their culture, their customs, and then when they came back to meet with their parents after that whole system, they actually just couldn't communicate, and
the tribes didn't want them anymore.
Yeah, and so that leads to self-deprecation. It leads to depression, and a lot of the times it leads to alcoholism and drugs.
To me, that's the worst part of it, is not being able to go back to your tribe.
Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle. These people are having kids that, and their parents are trying to drink and take drugs to wipe out a past, and then that cycles on to the next generation, and it's a vicious cycle. So, I mean, psychological help needs to be, health needs to be given to these people.
Do you think that the high amount of sexual assaults that we see on the reservations in Canada and the U.S., the correlation can be made from, say, what the Mormons, the sexual abuse that the Mormons did, and then the sexual abuse that the Catholics did in Canada? Do you think that could be like?
Well, that's only specific tribes, though, right? Because my tribe was wiped out by not the Mormons. It was wiped out by the U.S. government. It wasn't wiped out by any religion.
I'm saying the ones that were abused by Mormons, but in Canada, okay, so I shouldn't speak for all of the U.S. I'm just under the impression that they have this.
I just wanted clarification,
Yeah, so
because my tribe, the Saponi tribe, there's like a few people left and they're Christian.
Okay.
Like,
So in Canada, we have huge amounts of sexual assault on the reservation. I'm going to assume that they have the same problem in the U.S.
they do.
Do you think it's a direct correlation to the sexual abuse that it's kind of like it's passed on, right? Sexual abuse.
I think
the abused become the abuser.
I think you have a point, David. I think it's that whole societal cutoff of connection to who they are, to what they are. That has taken a generation after generation after generation after generation. It's passed on. I mean, we're not talking many generations. 1996 was when the last residential school was closed. So this perpetual cycle of abuse hasn't stopped. It has stopped with individuals. It has stopped with certain groups. But this is a massive problem that Canada just hasn't been addressing. Yes, we had that great reconciliation and we've had great progress into it, but this is a process that's going to take generations to fix. And we have to seriously sit down and find ways to help Native Americans in not only just get mental health, but the fucking reservations are third world.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like the fact that they're on their reservations kind of puts it like it's like it's not happening. You know what I mean? Because they're not in front of your face. You don't see them, and you don't really see what the conditions are on the reservations. So I fundamentally have a problem with the reservation. Now I'm not gonna go out there and be like, you know, you guys get off your fucking land and come and live in the city. But I really think that at this point in history, what is done has been done. We can move forward, but I don't think we're going to move forward with the reservation system the way that it is. Because to understand for the people in Europe that are listening, the landmass that is Canada, it is so fucking, it takes you a full week to drive across this country. So there's
you have natives who don't want to leave their reservations
exactly,
because it's
and
the
that's
part
why,
of that land that they still own.
Yeah, and that's why I said I wouldn't want to force them out, but it's a problem in fixing the problem. It hurts it. It honestly does.
But to them, you know, it feels like taking away the only thing they have left.
I wouldn't force it. But it's not like we gave them the coolest spots, Karen. It wasn't like, here, have the best fucking part of Canada. It's like, here, have a reservation beside Vancouver. That's not what happened.
I used to go to a reservation when I was in college in upstate New York to gamble. And there was those few lucky people on the reservation who made all the money. And they control the reservation.
Yeah.
And that's why I brought up that show, The Red Road. It goes into a lot of the politics of being on a reservation in the United States. And I imagine there's some similarities to Canada as well.
But the groups that are actually succeeding in Canada and many times in the United States as well are those that have self-governance. Nunavut is a prime example where you have a territory that was developed by Inuit people that actually have an opportunity to govern themselves within the country of Canada, but they have cultural classes. They teach their language. They're starting to get back. And you see a sense of pride that's going along with that. And you see that also in many places in British Columbia, some in Alberta. But the more we get...
The oil-rich reservations in Alberta, you're not going to get them on because they get paid a lot of money. They're probably doing the best out of all of them, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, and the biggest problem that I have is the Canadian response to the problem. And I've been on American reservations as well, where are much more desperate than some of the places I've been in Canada. But getting back to the sexual abuse case.
Yeah, sorry, we kind of went off on a tangent there.
This really highlights the hypocrisy of the Mormon Church, and in general Christianity. The idea that the most vulnerable of our society is being raped and the only word I can use, because it's not, they use the word sexual abuse, but it's rape. These kids will never be the same.
Maybe you can explain why they call them Lamanites and why they would want Native Americans in their schools and to adopt them, for people that don't know anything about Mormonism real quick. Just give us like the Cliff Note version.
Basically, there was two sons, Nephi and Laman. They both had Laman and Lemuel.
He was pretty lame.
Yeah. And then you have Nephi, and basically they splintered off into two groups. Their people. So the people that were righteous were called Nephites, and they were white. The people that were Lamanites were bad, and they were made dark. And so basically that's what happened. It's basically the Lamanites were wicked, and the Nephites were good. So we get.
How do people still believe this crap when genetics has disproved it?
Because they self-censor. It's cognitive dissonance that they can't get past. They don't look at other stuff that's non-Mormon. They just don't believe it.
Oh, as I recall, wasn't there some kind of anecdote where some Mormon leader was watching a Lamanite session and he swore that he could see the Aboriginal person's like skin getting whiter as he learned?
He saw them like as they because he saw Aboriginal children that weren't with Aboriginal families placed in the Lamenite program. And sometimes they were lighter skinned than their parents, and a lot of that had to do with rape, white people raping children. But sometimes it's just a natural pigmentation difference. And what he said was they're becoming more righteous. That's what he took. More righteous you are, the whiter you will become.
Mormons are just straight up racist.
They're probably just getting raped by white people, so their kids were coming out later. It's just like, in the South, and they're fucking their slaves. Why do you think they have, the lighter-skinned people they could pass and go up north and make some money for the family and then forget all about them?
It happens.
It happens.
So what's going to happen with this? Do you think it's going to go to tribal court, or if it's held in Utah, it's statute of limitations? You guys have statute of limitations on rape cases?
Oh yeah.
Because in Canada, like, you can just get charged there's no such thing as statute of limitations on any kind of crime. So if you commit a crime, you can be charged whenever.
Rape, there's a statute of limitations on rape. Like
in some states it's up to 5
well,
years.
I think it's different. It's different in every state. I think they've made the statute a little longer since DNA evidence and how backed up they are with rape kits. So they've had to kind of extend it. But I think that's a state statute, not a federal statute, is it? I'm asking a bunch of Canadians, like, they should fucking know.
I have no idea. We don't have that here.
My armchair analysis would be that the biggest fight's going to be with the jurisdiction that this is going to be settled in. So I could go up to the Supreme Court just simply deciding if this should be in Navajo court or Utah. So I think this probably case could go long. It probably will go up to Supreme Court depending on what's being decided. And once that happens, then they're going to decide if it goes to Utah court or Navajo court. Then maybe they'll get a chance to go to argue what the merits are. But
now my next question is, in Canada, native reservations, native status, the natives that have status cards, which is also a fucked up thing, but that falls under federal jurisdiction. So would it be a federal case at that point, or would it be still state? Because in Canada it would be federal. It's federal land.
On a reservation, a tribal council has its own police force.
Wouldn't that be fucked up if they put them in Navajo jail for the rest of their lives? That'd be fucking hilarious.
Well, I think it'll be ironic at best, but I don't think it'll get that far. I think they will, if it's held in Utah, which I think is what is going to happen, because the fucking Mormons have big bank. When you have big bank, you're going to be able to get the lawyers to argue a case better. It just happens. If they can go to tribal if they can go to tribal council, they have a shot. If they don't, they get to and go to Utah. Most judges are Mormon. Most lawyers are Mormon. They're not going to get a fair hearing. It's going to be the fact that it's going to be out of statute of limitations. It's going to be out of time. So it's going to be thrown out just on that. If they could, by chance, get one person under the limit, you're not going to get an impartial justice system. No one's going against the church if they're Mormon. That's not going to happen. You'll see.
Well, but you've seen people go against the church with the gay stuff.
You're not getting it in a Mormon church, in a Mormon court. It's not happening. It's either federal or you're never going to get it.
So would it be fair to have it in Utah and make sure that the fucker wasn't Mormon?
Yeah.
Because I would, and this is going to sound shitty, but don't you think that either side would have, because in the court of law, it's just supposed to be about black and white evidence. You're not supposed to have any biases. So I would think that a Navajo court would have biases and a Mormon court would have biases. That's why at the beginning when I said maybe they should take it out of state, but maybe they should bring in a judge that isn't a Mormon and have it on, different grounds than both sides that have emotional vested interest in it. And just because, justice is supposed to be blind to all that, just straight evidence, straight facts.
Well, I think the key is just to not have it thrown out based on the statute of limitation. At least get it heard, right? At least with the Navajo thing, you could assume that there can be a fair trial, but at least they'll potentially get a trial versus it being just kicked out before it even starts.
Yeah. But if history's told us one thing, Native Americans by far in the United States don't get a fair shake. They just don't. Yeah. And that's the sad part about it.
You need to say North America when you say that, because I know we give America a lot of shit.
Yeah,
on the show for the shitty things that they do with black people and other things, but really in this case, you just say North America because we're no better.
No, and I was just using the United States in the context of the story, but yeah, I agree. I mean, more Native Americans, especially in the United States and in Canada, there's a higher proportion of Native Americans in prison for their population size than there really needs to be. And but anyway. I think the only option that they could use to win this case is if they went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the only hope they have.
All right. And what are the chances of that happening?
Very good in this case because of the fact it's jurisdictional.
Okay. I don't really have, I know we kind of really went off the main topic. I don't really have anything. Mormons fucking suck. And if you're a Mormon, I know everybody likes to pretend that you're nice people, but maybe Mormons themselves are nice people. But
we're really, really nice. We are the army of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Too bad.
It's bullshit. The leaders suck. How about that?
And this is only, and I don't mean to say only because that's just a bad word. This is only the tip of the iceberg because there are sexual abuse happening in the Mormon church with non-natives as well. That's not being talked about. It's pushed under the rug, and it's slowly starting to come to light.
Well, it's a religion, so it's a given.
Yeah, I agree. They're fuckers.
Abuse of power. Consistently.
This was the Wayward Atheist podcast. Visit our new website at waywardatheists.com. Follow us on Spreaker, spreaker.com/waywardatheists. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at waywardatheists and on facebook.com/waywardatheists. If you enjoy our content, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes and feel free to support us at patreon.com/waywardatheists.